Bodh Gaya is not an especially grand city in India, but stepping inside the walls of its most sacred complex, the atmosphere changes. The noise of the street fades away, replaced by the low rhythm of chanting and the smell of incense. This is the Mahabodhi temple, and it is one of the largest centers of Buddhism and one of the most sacred places on earth. Thousands of years ago, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, is said to have attained enlightenment here, under the shade of the Bodhi Tree. The temple itself was first constructed under the Mauryan Emperor Ashoka in the 3rd century BC, making it one of the earliest Buddhist temples built in brick to have survived into the modern era. The temple has borne witness to nearly 2,500 years of history, and remains one of the most important pilgrimage sites in the Buddhist world today. So let's see how Civilization VI uses the history of the holy site and what we can learn from it. In Civilization VI, the Mahabodhi temple provides the following bonuses: +4 faith, 2 free apostles, and +2 diplomatic victory points when built. It's very obvious that this is an extremely faith-focused wonder, so let's get a bit into its history and place these effects in a greater context. And I think the best place to start would be to explain how Siddhartha Gautama is connected to Bodh Gaya. Siddhartha was born into a noble family in the foothills of the Himalayas, in what is now southern Nepal. According to tradition, he lived a sheltered and privileged life until he ventured outside his father's palace, and saw the misery and suffering that people face. Deeply affected, Siddhartha left the palace, his wife and son, to understand more about life, human suffering, and how that suffering can be alleviated. He began by denying himself any material goods, following an ascetic lifestyle, where he would go extended periods of time without eating or drinking. After years of this practice, he concluded that neither deprivation nor luxury could bring him closer to his goal, and instead chose a balanced approach, what he called the middle way. He eventually settled beneath a large sacred fig tree in the city of Bodh Gaya. There, he entered a deep and long state of meditation, resolving not to rise until he had found the answers he was looking for. According to Buddhist tradition, after several days of meditation, he achieved a profound state of insight and liberation, understanding the nature of suffering, its causes, and the path leading to its end. This experience is what Buddhism calls enlightenment, and from that moment, Siddhartha Gautama became the Buddha, a Sanskrit word meaning the awakened one. Rather than retreating into solitary contemplation, the Buddha spent the remaining 40 or so years of his life walking across the Indian subcontinent, teaching. The teachings spread, and within a few centuries, Buddhism had become one of the most influential religious and philosophical traditions in the world. The site where the Buddha reached enlightenment, under the sacred fig tree in Bodh Gaya, is where the Mahabodhi temple was built. The faith bonus that the Mahabodhi temple provides in Civ VI is pretty self-explanatory at this point. The temple is steeped in religious significance, with thousands of Buddhists from all around the world visiting to be able to pray and meditate in one of the religion's most sacred sites. I think that is more than enough to justify a simple faith bonus. As for the 2 free apostles and the diplomatic victory points, we have to introduce the man who ordered the construction of the Mahabodhi temple and was responsible for the early spread of Buddhism. Ashoka the Great was the emperor of the Mauryan Empire and the 3rd ruler from his dynasty. The Mauryan Empire was one of the largest of the ancient world, stretching across most of the Indian subcontinent. Under the leadership of Ashoka, the empire expanded through military conquest, reaching its peak with the Kalinga War, one of the bloodiest conflicts of that time period. The suffering caused by the war appears to have deeply affected Ashoka. According to his own inscriptions, hundreds of thousands were killed and displaced. In the 13th major rock edict, it is inscribed that Ashoka felt remorse about the Kalinga War, and it is true that after the war's end, Ashoka devoted the rest of his life to Buddhism and its principles, like that of ahimsa, meaning non-violence, and Dharma Vijaya, a form of moral victory through Dharma. Whether this change of course was indeed a personal matter for Ashoka, or just a calculated political and administrative move, is up to debate. What remains true, however, is that during the rest of his rule, the Mauryan Empire saw great prosperity and peace. It is within this context that Ashoka ordered the construction of 84,000 stupas or viharas, Buddhist temples and monasteries. Arguably the holiest of those was the Mahabodhi temple, constructed around the holy Bodhi Tree in Bodh Gaya. Now, to explain the three apostles and the diplomatic victory points that this wonder provides in-game, we can look at how Ashoka spread Buddhism around his territories as well as outside of them. It is inscribed in Ashoka's rock edicts that many Buddhist missions were sent all around the ancient world, even reaching the ancient Greeks. This has been referenced as a moral dharmic victory, in contrast to the bloody conquest of Kalinga. I think it is also enough to explain the apostles that the wonder provides in-game, seeing as how apostles in Civ VI are important religious units that can spread religion very easily. As for the diplomatic victory points, I think we can look at Rock Edict number 2, where it is inscribed that Ashoka arranged the medical treatment for both people as well as animals. What is very interesting about this is that this treatment was carried out not only in the territories of the Mauryan Empire, but also in those of its neighboring kingdoms. Whether this is true or just a piece of ancient propaganda, Ashoka was seen as a very gracious ruler after his adoption of Buddhism, and I think that a move like this one would absolutely qualify as something that would give diplomatic victory points in Civ VI. I mean, there are literal World Congress events in-game that are basically handing out diplomatic victory points to the player who helped another civilization the most, so it really fits quite nicely. The wonder requires the theology Civic. Buddhism is not a simple or loosely defined belief system. If someone was to study it to its core, they would have to read a vast body of texts and familiarize themselves with sophisticated school of thoughts and large amount of concepts and definitions. I think theology as a civic is a way to represent the formalization of religious belief, treating it as a collection of interconnected disciplines that form a coherent way of life. Treating the Mahabodhi temple as a representation of Buddhism, theology is a perfectly appropriate civic for it, without question. The wonder must be built on woods adjacent to a holy site with a temple, and you must have founded a religion. I have good news and bad news for this one. To start with the good news, I think that having to place the wonder on top of woods is an excellent and subtle nod to the history of the wonder. The observant among you may have already made the connection to the Bodhi Tree, the tree under which the Buddha reached enlightenment in Bodh Gaya. The tree that stands in the Mahabodhi temple complex today is believed to be a direct descendant of the original, propagated from a sampling taken to Sri Lanka by Ashoka's missionaries in the 3rd century BC and later returned to Bodh Gaya. It is believed that the Mahabodhi temple has a lot of descendants all around the world, from Hawaii to Japan and Australia, since its seeds and saplings have been used in Buddhist missionary work. Now for the bad news, I am sad to say that this is one more example of that thing that Civ VI loves to do with its wonders. I am of course talking about the redundant need of having a temple in the city before constructing the Mahabodhi temple. Just let the wonder provide the city with a free temple, it would make so much more sense. This is the 4th time this has happened in this series so far, and I doubt it's going to be the last. So I think it's a good time to introduce the redundant building requirement wall of shame. From now on, all the wonders that require a certain building to be present in the city before being built will be placed here. I wonder how long this list is going to get. But, to end the segment on a more positive note, having the Mahabodhi temple be next to a holy site is pretty accurate, since Bodh Gaya has many other religious monuments and temples in its premises, like the Great Buddha statue and many other smaller Buddhist temples and shrines.
In a dusty, bustling corner of the Indian state of Bihar, there is a magical place that one might think of as the hub of Buddhism.
The in-game quote comes from... Wait. Really? This must be some kind of placeholder that the developers forgot to change, right? Well, okay. The quote comes from a visitor's guide to Bodh Gaya, and it's not a bad one, it just feels kinda lazy, I guess. Well, the quote describes Bodh Gaya and the Mahabodhi temple in a quite literal sense. Can't think of much else to comment on, really. All the quotes we've seen so far from the other wonders make less direct references to the wonders, either through poetry, old descriptions, or thematic connections. Some of you may have noticed that in the compilation videos, I am using the Proverbi mod that replaces most quotes in the Little Wonder construction animations. Well, that mod uses a quote from the Digha Nikaya, a collection of Buddhist scriptures, which I obviously prefer from the one the developers chose. Something interesting about the Mahabodhi temple is that it is the first wonder in this series that is still being used as it was when it was first constructed. However, it is important to note that for the first centuries of the temple's existence, it looked quite different. In the original construction, ordered by Emperor Ashoka in 250 BC, only a monastery and shrine were erected, as well as a diamond throne built under the Bodhi Tree. This early temple has not survived, but the most likely scenario was that it was used to protect the Bodhi Tree. The current structure, and the one that the game is depicting, was constructed some centuries later, in the 5th or 6th century AD, during the reign of the Gupta Empire. The temple declined over the years, with multiple destructions and restorations happening, but the way it is in its current state resulted from a restoration that was undertaken by the then British colonial government of India in the 1880s. I quite liked learning more about the temple, because admittedly, I know very little about the history of India and Buddhism, so it was a lot of new information for me. It was nice to see that even if the Wonders features look fairly straightforward at a glance, there was still some interesting stuff going on. I am mainly referring to the diplomatic victory points and the requirement of the Wonder being built on top of a forest, representing the Bodhi Tree. Both of those have very nice possible explanations that I could never have imagined if I wasn't making this series. So even if I find the quote choice to be borderline offensive, it's still a pretty good depiction overall.